For today's video, we will be reacting to Konstatin Kisin's video about what a just peace with Ukraine looks like.
Ukraine, what does a good deal look like?
Now, what is a good deal versus a just peace? I think this is the crux of the argument. What do we want out of a just peace? What does it mean? And what are you willing to sacrifice for it? Because there's always this scenario that an unjust peace is preferable to a just peace. Certainly, we could hypothesize about a scenario where in which we have an unjust peace that we all agree, everyone in the world agrees 100% that this peace deal is absolutely unjust. But it is going to save 100 million people's lives versus we'll have a just peace in 5 years. And everyone agrees 100% that this is an absolutely, completely just, fair, equitable, correct, virtuous peace. But an extra 100 million people have to die. In that scenario, do you want the unjust peace or the just peace? I think you're kind of a monster if you want the just peace. I think you're kind of a monster if that principle is worth more to you than hundreds of millions of people's lives that you could have saved if you had just said, you know what, I'll sacrifice a little bit of this thing that I call justice that is to a degree nebulous and to a degree people disagree about and debate all the time. What is justice? What is good? What is right? People's lives are very much not in debate. Dead, alive, we know the difference. Just, unjust, there's a lot of gray area. Which is why I like that this guy actually says good deal instead of this term that I've really only heard recently, just peace.
As predicted, following the bust-up in the Oval Office, President Zelensky has struck a conciliatory tone and is today traveling to Saudi Arabia to discuss peace plans with the US delegation. This is the result of many developments, including Trump freezing both military and intelligence support for Ukraine in an effort to force Zelensky to the negotiating table.
Yeah, that's true. Now, again, do I think that that is a just, virtuous action? That I'm withholding necessary support to ostensibly an ally or someone who is at least more ideologically aligned with us, or at the very least, aligned against a common enemy, Russia in this scenario, to force that person to do what I want? Probably not. But again, what do you want? Do you want everything you do to be informed by virtue and only virtue? Or do you want to consider the facts on the ground? What is more important to you? Is it the ephemeral? Is it the ideal? Or is it the pragmatic? Is it the stuff on the ground? Is it the people's lives that you can save tomorrow as opposed to reckoning with your God tomorrow? I don't know.
He went further still, with US officials apparently holding meetings with Zelensky's main rivals, former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, former Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko, and Ukraine's current ambassador to the UK, and the former head of its armed services, Valery Zaluzhny. According to reports, all of them predictably rejected the idea of holding elections while the war is ongoing. They all lag behind.
This is something that is brought up a fair bit. The suspension of sort of democracy and democratic principles. In all honesty, I've heard both sides of this argument. I believe Konstantin Kisin, last I looked, last I heard from him, was basically saying, look, this is not the only time this has ever happened. Zelensky is not the first person to, pause democratic elections in a time of war, which is, I believe, factually correct. I believe that is historically accurate. The other side of this is, well, Winston Churchill has, an enormous, he puts together a cabinet of people that are, both for him, against him, in the middle. It's a big, giant, bipartisan coalition of people. And that is not what's happening with Zelensky. Zelensky's cracked down a little bit more on that stuff. Now, again, I understand. Look, it's wartime. you know, look at Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln did a lot of tyrannical type stuff in the furtherance of the, Civil War. So again, principles, practicalities.
Zelensky in the polls. And much more importantly, it's kind of difficult to have an election while millions of your citizens are refugees or on the front line and the country is being bombed on a daily basis.
Yeah.
The MAGA talking points about Zelensky being a dictator and calls for an immediate election are just that. Talking points designed to put pressure on the Ukrainian president to come to the negotiating table. Frustrating.
Yeah. All right, let's say that's the case. I mean, I think there's probably a room for interpretation and there's room for nuance here. But let's just say that that's the case. What else was the, White House meeting about? It was optics. That's what it was. I mean, it was not the first time. These pressers happen all the time. And they're generally speaking all agreed upon. We know what the deal is. We're getting something from you. You're getting something from us. This is the whole deal. And we're just here to, put on a good show. And yet, Zelensky does come in and he tries to big dog alpha Trump. And, Trump, JD Vance don't have it. I don't really care that's those sort of public relations outings are not meant for me. They don't do anything for me. I'm much more interested and only really care about the pragmatic, practical, what's actually happening in these deals. Why are these deals happening? The press junket, I don't really care. But he's taking his case to the American people. He's doing an optics politics tour of, hey, we're Ukraine, we're really in a lot of trouble. We really want a lot of this stuff. I'm doing it in front of the media, and that's my strategy. If the American strategy is MAGA talking points that Zelensky's a dictator and that ends the war, true, not true, not really probably true. But again, where do you want to put your money? Is it peace or is it principles?
As this barrage of lies about Ukraine and its leaders is, and Douglas Murray lays them out brilliantly in this important and courageous article, what ultimately matters is whether this conflict can be ended on terms that make the brave sacrifice of the Ukrainian people worth it. So what would a good deal for Ukraine and for the world look like? Whether an agreement is good or not is a reflection first and foremost of the reality on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Again, yeah. So again, let's say that was his first founding principle. What does a good deal look like? It's founded on base principle, primordial level, pragmatic reality on the ground. Justice, not the foundation principle.
You might feel ripped off if you pay an extra $20 for dinner, but if on your way home from the restaurant a mugger pulls a gun on you, handing over the entire contents of your wallet in exchange for your life will seem like a great deal. After fighting courageously for over 3 years, the Ukrainians are not going to make any more forward progress. Even if they could, the current US administration will simply not provide the military hardware they need, and the Europeans can't do so even if they wanted to.
True.
You may like or dislike this, but reality is reality.
Yep.
It's also true that the Ukrainians have inflicted heavy casualties on their Russian invaders, and Russia's desire to keep fighting is waning. Vladimir Putin has little incentive to keep the fighting going if a peace deal that allows him to claim victory is done.
Yes, I think this is a good point. If I don't know Russia's full willingness to continue this war, I've certainly heard reports that Russia is doing the sort of same sort of forced conscription that Ukraine is doing, and therefore waning support. I'm completely in agreement with that as a reasonable idea. And if it was a democratic country, that waning of support is way more important. In an authoritarian state, my population doesn't agree with me doing this. Well, that's great. They don't really have a say. It's me. It's up to me. The only scenario here where that actually makes a difference is if the support wanes so much that people are willing to, commit a revolution. Which maybe you'd think would be a good thing, but again, definitely way more blood on the ground if that's the scenario. As opposed to, hey, let's broker a peace deal and we'll stop this fighting, we'll stop this war.
This is what the map on the ground looks like today and how it has evolved over time. As I said only days after the conflict started, the be-all and end-all for Ukraine is not territory. Crimea was lost in 2014, and much of the Donbass is today a barren, desolate wasteland whose entire male population has been decimated after being forcibly enlisted into the Russian army and sent to their deaths in what the soldiers euphemistically call meat assaults. Even if Russia retains all the land it currently occupies, this would not be a strategic defeat for Ukraine. What matters is one thing and one thing only: Ukraine's long-term sovereignty and independence. This is what all the disagreements are really about. Britain, France, and other European nations will likely be willing to commit peacekeeping troops with a US backstop to make sure that Russia does not invade again down the line.
Okay, so again, good deal is stops the fighting, doesn't really matter about territory seizure or release, does not matter that much. Continued sovereignty of Ukraine with guarantees for peace. Peace in this scenario being there are troops via, US, EU, UK troops to some degree or another. Maybe there's a US base. There's not going to be a US military base. That's not going to happen. But there's, some US military presence there, perhaps in the form of security for minerals companies.
So far, the Russians have claimed that this is not acceptable, and Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov claimed the presence of Western troops would inevitably lead to an extremely dangerous escalation.
That is also a scenario that I have heard. If the mineral deal goes through and there are Americans on the border, Americans being on the border with Russia and Ukraine, even if they're in some sort of, demilitarized zones, something along those lines, that does absolutely lead us to a precipice, or at the very least, it increases the statistical likelihood of bad things happening to Americans caused by Russians and escalating into, World War III, or at the very least, an armed conflict between the US and Russia without any proxies.
This is likely why President Trump has attempted to secure a ceasefire without providing the security guarantees that Ukraine is insisting on, arguing that a mineral deal which creates a US commitment to Ukraine is enough, particularly given that Putin has never reneged on a deal with Trump. My view is that any agreement that fails to create a physical barrier between Ukraine and Russia would be a bad deal for Ukraine and for the world for a number of reasons.
Okay.
First, it may be true that Trump can keep Putin in check, but neither Trump nor
That's definitely it. Yeah. He's going to be basically saying, look, even if Trump and Putin are best friends or are, diametrically opposed enemies that, have some sort of mutual respect for each other, and they both go, look, they're both crazy. I'm not going to mess with that guy because he'll go crazy. I'm not going to mess with that guy because he's going to go crazy. All right, cool. We're good to go. But if the next person that comes in under the US is, Kamala Harris, and Trump's like, she's a clown. Or Putin is like, she's a clown. I'm going to do whatever I want now. Okay, well, now all of a sudden, this loose peace deal negotiated by two people and basically upheld by the respect between those two people is now worthless.
Putin will be in power forever. Indeed, President Trump's term in office will last less than 4 years. What is to stop Putin or his eventual replacement from repeating the 2022 invasion once Trump is out of office? Second, we've all seen
that does also, the idea of Putin's successor or Putin after Trump advancing in Ukraine does basically rely on the assumption that Putin does just have massive territorial aspirations. And this is according to like the Peter Zion model of, look, Russia basically wants to go west a couple of countries so that they get, geographical hard borders. So, mountains, rivers, oceans, things that make invasion more difficult. That seems unlikely because, again, the amount of countries that he would have to go over is like 3 or 4 countries further, and all of those countries are like in NATO. So it would be an absolute, yeah, it's not one of these border Ukraine. It's not quite in the EU. It's not quite in NATO. It's not quite in the thing. And therefore, we can kind of ignore it, even though it's not great for us. Yeah, this would be no, no, no. If you're going to follow the law of the, alliance, World War III immediately, bam, kicks off. No doubt about it. So I don't really subscribe to that uh, territorial aspirational view of Putin. Uh, I'm much more aligned with the idea that Ukraine was not necessarily a one off, but much more so an isolated incident.
Agonizing over Russia's red lines in the wake of this invasion. If the only thing holding Russia at bay are words on a piece of paper, what happens if they decide to renege on the deal anyway? Once Russian troops are in Ukraine, we are once again faced with a choice between the risk of nuclear escalation and letting Russia bite more pieces of Ukraine, if not annex it entirely or install a puppet government. Third, in my view, this was the entire point of Ukraine making a stand in 2022 in a way that they didn't in 2014. Leaving the country vulnerable to future invasions means that all the sacrifices Ukrainians made and all the support and funding we have provided them has been a waste. The conversation about land is a distraction from this critical issue. If Ukraine ends up giving away land in exchange for security guarantees, it will have been worth it. If, however, it ends up with more land, but is left in permanent limbo, in constant anticipation of another invasion, that will not only be a bad thing for Ukraine, but for the rest of us too. Because
yes, again, what would you rather have? Would you rather have let's say, in this scenario, Russia's the bad guy, they invaded illegally, and therefore they need to release all claim to all historically Ukrainian territory. So the Donbass, Crimea, gone. You know what? Get rid of them. They're back. They're Ukrainian again. Okay. And peace deal. We've got it. Words on paper. We all agree that's a just end the war. We all agree that is a just peace deal. And we also all know in the back of our heads that in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, Russia's coming back and it's going to be worse than ever. And they're going to just smash through Ukraine. They're going to do even more stuff and they're going to kill even more people. And they're going to do it in such a way that there's absolutely no possibility of them making a stand. And they annex all of Ukraine. Do you want justice? Do you want peace? Where is your priority? Pragmatism versus principle.
Because we're all likely to find ourselves in this exact same situation further down the line.
I should also reiterate, they're not mutually exclusive. We're looking for a balance here, but where do you put the priority? Is it boots on the ground? Is it the facts on the ground? Is it the pragmatic realities of the situation and the pragmatic consequences of your actions? Or is it the principle of the matter? Now, here's the thing. Some people will absolutely say, yeah, you know what? I don't really care. It's the principle of the matter. I will absolutely spit in your face, even if it earns me a punch. A punch in the face will beat the crap out of me. I'm still going to spit in your face because, you just disrespected me. It's the principle of the matter. Other people are going to go, yeah, you know what? If I thought we could, have a normal fight and we'd each get in some licks, then I would stand up for those principles. But you're 6'5", 300 pounds, nothing but muscle. You know what? I'm going to let it slide.
And finally, the big risk with a deal that fails to ensure Ukrainian security is the impact it has on the psyche of other smaller nations around the world. If powerful countries can invade smaller countries with impunity, we are guaranteeing ourselves an inevitable uptick in the proliferation of nuclear weapons. If Ukraine had nukes
There, I disagree. Proliferation of nuclear weapons, I mean, maybe he's going to make more points here, but I think that is not a piece of this. Proliferation of conflict, for the purpose of conquest, sure, yes, I would absolutely make that argument. Absolutely, 100%. If they, if Russia gets what they want, if China gets what they want, by invading Taiwan and, nothing happens, well, hell, I mean, we should invade other places and conquer them because we get something out of it and we've got the capabilities of doing it. No one else has the capabilities of defending against that. So let's do it. Nuclear weapons is a bit of a stretch because they are not. I don't even know if we could call them weapons of conquest because they're weapons of destruction.
On February 24, 2022, it would not have been invaded. What reason do other countries with powerful enemies?
This does make sense. Nuclear weapons as a means of deterrence.
Have not to pursue a nuclear weapons program as quickly as possible. If you enjoy these videos, you should...
Interesting. If Ukraine had nuclear weapons, the invasion does not happen. I don't know if that's true. Maybe the invasion happens differently. Maybe there's a more concerted diplomatic effort. Maybe there's a lead up where there's a conversation between these nations of like, hey, you're really pushing us to a red line here. You're absolutely pushing us to the point where we're going to invade. And you've got nuclear weapons, so we're a little bit more wary of committing ourselves to a military conflict. That's a possibility. And certainly, yes, I think the idea that smaller nations maybe see nuclear weapons as their only viable alternative in terms of defense, I think that makes sense. But again, the idea here is, mutually assured destruction. And I don't care if every single one of these small nations immediately embark on full bore, we go 120% hardcore into developing nuclear weapons. You're not going to match China, Russia, US stockpiles of nuclear weapons. In any remote stretch of time. And the race to getting them makes the use of nuclear weapons while you still don't have them way, way more incentivized. Because, hey, if they don't have them right now and they're going full bore trying to get it, really, we're kind of losing out here if we don't use ours when there's no defense. And I don't think everyone in charge of all of these countries is an idiot. So I think they can kind of see that writing on the wall. And the mutually assured destruction argument, maybe it doesn't hold water anymore, but I still think it's pretty well embedded in the psyche of, most reasonable humans on the planet. Let's see if there's anything more.
Know that they're available as articles on my Substack at konstantinkisin.com.
Yeah, that's it. All right, so that's it for this video. Again, what does a just peace for Ukraine look like? What does a good deal for Ukraine look like? So a good deal is, according to Konstatin Kisin, and I would agree with this, it's the deal in which Ukraine has a long, sustainable, sovereign future. Any deal that makes that happen is a good deal for Ukraine. Losing territory is not really a big deal. Having a buffer, having a security deal, whatever it is that secures the future of Ukraine as Ukraine is a good deal for Ukraine. What is a just peace in terms of Ukraine? I really, honestly, I don't know. I really don't know. Please let me know in the comments what would be a just peace according to you. I really don't know. I don't even know if I care. Again, in this scenario, I'm way more interested in the pragmatics of a peace deal as opposed to the principled arguments of what is justice in war. Call me crazy, but that's where I'm standing on this. With that being said, good luck in all your endeavors. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope you enjoyed this, and I shall say farewell for now.